This is a conversation with Julian, who is a vehicle resident and advocate, is going to be sharing a bit about his experiences as a vehicle resident. My name is Graham Pruss. I am the moderator for today's conversation, and with Julian, very excited to be here. So let's just jump right into it, Julian. First off, well, I don't know. Do you want to take a moment to share a little bit of your story, or should we actually? I think your first question.
Yeah, just give me a moment to introduce myself, to share a little bit of my story.
Perfect. Let's do it.
I'd like to use this opportunity to thank everyone who prepared this great summit, and specifically thanks to Marika who organized this in a lot of ways. She's not with us right now. I hope and I wish her all the best in being well. I hope her to get better soon and be back with us, with the tribe. Isaac Newton, he loved a lot of things like paradoxes. He said, if you and me have an apple each, and we exchange these apples, we still have one apple each. But if you and me have one idea and we exchange these ideas, we'll have two ideas each. So we exchanging knowledge. Thank you for the great opportunity to do that. But we must remember that the knowledge is a deadly friend if no one sets the rules. And so we're going to try to do that in the later stages, not during this session, of course. My first experience dealing with lack of proof of residency happened 40 years ago on the other side of the globe, on the opposite side of the globe. And back then, experiencing homelessness, I realized that these things, they related to everything. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't get to school. I couldn't go visit my local library, visit doctors. As it turned out, I was not even able to get married. And so 40 years later, I'm back now on the other side of the world and experiencing domicile issues here. Now, I lived in New York for more than 30 years, and for more than 15 years, I tried to obtain, being a disabled, I tried to obtain public housing in New York City, unsuccessfully. And I went through hell, just to realize if you want to get something done, you better do it yourself. Being fortunate enough to have Social Security disability, I was able to save up, collect, and get myself a van, learn a lot of things through YouTube, like we all do today. And now I'm a man who lives in a van down by the river. Questions, answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. And you said that you live in a van. How long have you been living in your van, and what part of the country do you live in? When you said you were from New York, is that correct?
Yes, I'm originally from New York, but I couldn't wait to escape that damn place, and so I live in a van for 4.5 years now. Out of these 4.5, 2 years, I was what they call stealth camping in the city. All that time, I was trying to save up and collect more and fix this. It was quarter of a century old. Now it's almost 30 years old van. And it took a long time, and it took lots and lots of money and lots of blood, sweat, and tears to do that. To take 30-year-old vehicle across the country, it's a mad idea to begin with. So this van had to be prepared, and not just go on the road, but also taking it off-road. And it's an ongoing project, and it still needs to be maintained and fixed all the time.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And well, let's move on to the questions, Julian. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your background and what brought you to our conversation today. I want to share a little bit about our getting to know each other for over the last several years. This is the topic of this conversation has come up many times. And this is something that Julian, I appreciate you bringing this over and over to us, but I want to let you know that it's happened. I hear this conversation and this request all throughout the work that we do. When we do outreach to Arizona, when we go and visit other groups of people and we do research and interviewing people living in vehicles, the issues around residency requirements and how that affects people's lives are really significant. And many people who don't live in vehicles have no idea that these sorts of things exist, that these problems exist. And so I just want to say thank you, Julian, for your vulnerability, for sharing your experiences and bringing light to this issue, because I'm sure that many people on this call, that this will resonate with them, that they have experienced similar issues. And I really look forward to them to also answering the same questions I'm going to ask you if they feel up to it, about what their experiences have been and about hearing from your experiences of your answers to these questions and your experiences around challenges of residency requirements. So again, thank you, Julian, very much for encouraging us and holding us to having this session, because it's very, very valuable. So our first question. Thank you. So our first question, and I think you kind of talked around it a bit, but I know that you probably have a very specific answer, is what questions have you yourself, Julian, experienced related to your residency requirements?
First of all, I'd like to say that your life may totally depend on proof of residency. Proof of residency system is totally wrong and inhumane. It deprives us of basic human rights. But for many people, it may be completely unseen and unnoticeable. For those who live in their vehicles, it's a constant struggle to find loopholes, know-hows, and workarounds. Things to consider choosing your domicile. Is this the question? Or what obstacles?
No. The question is, I think you're a question ahead. The question is, what challenges have you experienced related to your residency requirements? And I just want to be clear, when we talk about residency requirements, we're not talking about necessarily like citizenship requirements. We're talking about residency by state, right? That there is, people have requirements to have a residency within a state. This is different than, say, citizenship or immigration requirements. It's a different conversation. But please, Julian, continue.
You're talking about specific things like changing your documents from one state to another.
Right, yeah. Any of the challenges that you've experienced that are related to residency requirements.
Okay. These are the challenges, and I'm sure this is not a complete list of them. The way you and others look at you, your home, and yourself may be different. Problems begin when they see you and not just your vehicle. You have to be presentable, be courteous, take care of your vehicle and yourself. Try to keep it neat and clean. Don't make it look like a gypsy wagon. Maintaining your benefits is a challenge. Just maintaining your vehicle is very important as maintaining yourself. You have to learn how to stay in place. Follow your doctor's appointments. Follow your social services appointments. You have to be resourceful, be prepared, and do a lot of research. You have to be able to plan ahead, no matter what you do. You have to try to be on top of the situation, no matter where you get or what it is. And do not act on emotions. Remember that social services people are human beings too. They may have their own ethical, moral, and political stance. It may transfer to prejudice and bias from all the things. You have to learn how to avoid unnecessary paperwork while constantly moving. You may come across things like banks, DMV, and post office refusing services to you. We all probably remember a Soup Nazi episode from Seinfeld. And this type of things may happen to you. You may come across these things. We talked about it before. and clerks behaving Nazi-like. They abusing the system. I was refused once in New York. I was refused my food stamp services. The lady clerk told me that I have to bring a proof of residence in order to get my food stamps back, and she laughed at me. So this type of challenges you may endure while living on wheels. You have to remember that domicile can be used as a tool of coercion, as a weapon. A lot of times you must follow don't ask, don't tell formula, specifically like with your car insurance company. Do not bet your whole existence on individual people. Their views and beliefs may change. Relations may turn sour. They may flip, and being in control of your important mail that you totally depend on completely ruin your life, causing you lose your driver's license, social security, and all other benefits you receive. Instead of it, I would recommend to try to rely on PO box and local outreach place that helps people in need, homeless and disabled. They will help you to establish residency, do the paperwork, and keep your mail until you get it from them. You must learn to avoid problems even before they begin. Stay away from coastal line and resorts. In particular, avoid Eastern Sierra, I would recommend.
That's great.
Any more?
Thank you. Thank you, Julian. That is, I really appreciate that, and thanks for talking through the some of the challenges that you've experienced related to residency requirements. I haven't seen any questions come through chat, but would love to ask this to the group if anyone else wants to share any of the challenges that they've experienced related to residency requirements. That is of course, again, the requirement to establish residency in one area, and about needing to either access services, medical care, any sorts of other things that may be challenged by that, or getting mail, voting. There's so many different things that can be challenged by that. I'm going to actually move into our next question because I haven't seen any questions come through. But if you would like to send one to us, please do. We'd still love to hear from you. And when I put up the next question slide, I encourage you to read the question, and if you would like to send your answer over right away to our chat moderator TK, so that they can share it with us and that we can include you in this conversation, because we really want to have this as more of a group conversation with everyone, with Julian really opening up this space to talk about this. So we'll move on to the next question. So Julian, and you've talked, I think, a little bit about this in what we just said, but how has your state residence affected your access to healthcare and social services? Like, really specifically, what are the things that have been affected in terms of healthcare and social services because of where you are able to establish residence?
There was a huge challenge in the beginning. Originally, I established my residency near Death Valley, 100 miles away from the nearest doctor or pharmacy. These things to consider when you choose a place of domicile or residency. How often will you go there? How often you visit your doctors, or you go to a pharmacy? Will you be able to do like 100 miles to go there, 100 miles to come back, and maybe spend a day or two over there, going from one office to another to get your services, to get things done? These are things to consider. And it was a challenge for me in the beginning in that particular area. And my caseworker was 300 miles away from me. That was a challenge too. So these things you have to think ahead of when you choose your domicile, place of residency, where you establish your residency. Among other things, I would mention, like I already said, social and medical services, access to mail, which is also very important, because all your important letters will come to your place where you receive your mail, whether it's a PO box or someone else getting it for you, or mail services. Also access to parking and or camping sites. You have to mindful of the local weather when you choose your place of residency. You have to think of the local terrain. Will your vehicle be able to go through the places that you're planning to stay at? Death Valley. Not every vehicle will be capable. Not every human will be capable of just being there. Also, things like access to gas, food, water, restrooms, laundry, showers. These things must be considered. Access to vehicle repair services, access to storage facility. If you need to dump your stuff, have extra things that you don't want to carry with you. Also, very important thing to consider and think about is the cost of establishing residency. It may be pretty high, and so you have to like break it down and maybe think of that the whole thing of establishing residency will not take a day or two, a week or two. It may take month and month, and so this way you can stretch out your expenses and accomplish this goal.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Julian, so much. And I appreciate you talking about how state residence has affected your access to healthcare and social services. And I know that I think maybe even answered a little bit of our next question too, which is great. I want to again ask the group, the attendees today, has anyone else had their state residency affect their access to healthcare or social services? And would you like to share how that has affected you personally? Please, again, send your responses if you would like to the chat moderator, or if you'd like, you could say I would if it takes a bit to write up your message, and we can hold space for you. But I don't want to have us sitting here in silence. So we will move to the next question. But again, if you'd like to answer this question or the question before, please do send it to our chat moderator, and we'd love to include you in this conversation. Moving on to the next question, and again, I'm going to actually ask this question of the community. In fact, I think what I'm going to do right now is write in this question really quick. Residents affected your access to healthcare and social services. So if anybody would like to go back and, I can't actually write that. Chat moderator, can you please write in the question that is currently posted here? I'll send it to you because you are the only one who is able to post, as it should be. Great. And we'll go on to the next question. Julian, you just answered a few of these things about how you choose your place of residence, but I also want to ask this first off to the group to think about how you choose your place of residence, particularly if you're someone who's living in your vehicle and moving around between states. What are the different things that you take into consideration when you're looking at a place that you might have as your residence? Julian, I know that you talked a little bit about this in the last answer, but would you like to share a little bit more about what you choose or about what you consider when you're choosing a place of residence?
Definitely. As I was leaving New York and prepared to leave New York, I was told by many different people from social services and medical people. They all were like telling me, California is your best bet for medical, for social services. And so I hit to the West Coast, knowing that there are plenty of public lands around West Coast area, unlike East Coast. Generally, I knew that I have to be at the West, and California seemed to be my choice for medical and social. But I knew there is one huge obstacle for me. That's my vehicle. My vehicle, like I mentioned before, is almost 30 years old now, and it's being abused It's basically was a lemon when I bought it. And so the engine is so worn out that it will never pass emission tests in California. California has one of the strictest emission laws in the whole country, if not in the whole world. And I wouldn't even try to go there and do the test over there. And so I knew for me the choice of it would be like dual residency, what they call. Obtain Social Security, obtain like medical social services in one state, yet have vehicle registered and have a driver's license from another state. That's what they call dual residency. It's totally legal. It can be done, and I've done it for myself. And there are states that don't have vehicle inspection at all. For example, state of Tennessee, they don't have a vehicle inspection. But learning, just like on anything and on any subject, I realized that close to a state of California, like the state of Nevada, has like separate county that don't have emission inspections at all. Nye County in the state of Nevada. And so this may be your choice when you have similar issues, that you don't want to go through emissions and stuff like that.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate you giving that context. Again, I think that for people who don't have to consider that, who have never had to consider that, they may not even think about those sorts of things. And I really appreciate you sharing that, Julian. Harold also added that family and friends is something that he considers when thinking about places to be. I know that's common among a lot of people. There's a whole lot of items that are listed on this list. And I encourage you, please send your responses to our chat moderator. We'd love to include them in this conversation. But some of those things are things like people's personal safety, whether or not you feel safe in an area or feel like you will be safe in being in that region. Some cities, people may not feel safe as parked in. Again, as Harold mentioned, access to families and friends and communities, often communities on the road. Some people choose certain states of residency to be part of nomadic communities, actually, because like Nevada or Arizona, where there are a lot of people actually are living in vehicles and they can be part of those communities. Banking access is a huge one, right? Because being able to, and then that also overlaps with mail, accessing mail. Actually, a lot of things overlap with accessing mail. Banking access, being able to get your bills sent to you, tickets, driver's license, all these sorts of things can be really important when considering whether or not they will be received into whatever mailbox you need. Some places can do P.O. boxes, some places can't. Things like voting is a really big one. In some communities, in many cities, particularly on the West Coast, there's services or there's been work to help people who are living outdoors in vehicles and otherwise to vote and be able to connect with voting services, even if you don't have an address. But there's a lot of places where that's not the case. And so even though it is not illegal to be unhoused or to live in a vehicle, it can be very difficult to be able to vote. As Peggy Lee Kennedy just added, Wells Fargo closed her accounts. That's actually something that we've have actually been hearing a lot about in the last couple of years. Are certain banking companies that are actually closing out people's bank accounts if they don't have a physical address. A lot of people have used P.O. boxes or other types of addresses, maybe a family or friend's address, to establish a banking account, and are seeing those closed on them, which is, as you can imagine, has a significant effect. People's access to health insurance, the cost of vehicle insurance, vehicle emissions testing. Julian, I know you and I talked a lot about that as being an issue. And as you just mentioned, in California state, the vehicle emissions testing it's extremely strict. And yet, if you were to be in, say, Nevada, in certain places in Nevada, there are no vehicle emissions testing. So it may make more sense if you have a vehicle that wouldn't be able to pass emissions tests to register in Nevada, register your residency in Nevada rather than in California. There's so many different things that people take into consideration when they're choosing their place of residence. And again, this is the kind of thing that if for people who never lived in a vehicle, never lived on the road, or maybe are just living in a city and never had to change their place of residence, they may not consider how these might affect their lives. So again, I encourage you, if you have other things to add them into chat, and we'll include that as part of this. But we'll move on to the next question as we continue through our conversation. The next question is about maintaining benefits and care. Actually, I'm sorry, we have one more. I'm going to add this in. Kathleen said, I'm currently using my child's address in Idaho. This is not a long-term solution due to their upcoming changes in her life. I'm looking for a long-term solution. You're not alone, Kathleen. A lot of people are in that similar situation. And as I mentioned, they use friends and family members' addresses, but that may not be a permanent long-term solution. And in some cases, it may not even be possible. And we don't know how that may change over time. As Peggy Lee mentioned, banks are changing a lot of the regulations as the new ID forms come online in the United States, the big government new ID, that may affect these things. There's a lot of concerns and issues around place of residency and receiving mail specifically that, again, people don't consider if they're not in this lifestyle. So this is why it's important to have this conversation so that we can raise awareness about these sorts of issues. If you're an advocate or a legal advocate or somebody working in law, please pay attention, because these are the sorts of things that people are experiencing that we often don't hear about. So our next question is about maintaining benefits and care. Again, I encourage you to answer this question. We'll put this question in chat, please, moderator. And the question is, what has been the most important for you to maintain benefits and care, Julian?
Repeat the question, please.
Yeah, sorry, that was a big wind-up. I talked too much. I apologize. What has been most important for you to maintain your benefits and healthcare or any other kind of care?
I know if I lose my Social Security benefit, I won't be able to survive even for 1 month. It's totally unlike living on the streets of the city like it was before for me. This vehicle needs a lot of money poured in every month. Gasoline, repair and maintenance, insurance, things like that. And so this one of the highest importance for me to keep this thing running. Otherwise, my life stops. And if my van stops somewhere, like it happened last year when I got into an accident.
Thank you, Julian. I really appreciate that. Oh, sorry, what's that?
Also, I would like to stress it again for folks out there. Try not to rely on individuals when you're establishing your residency. People move, their views and beliefs change, relations may turn sour, many different things may happen. Your best bet is the local outreach place that helps people in need, people who live on wheels. They will help you out with all the paperwork. They will help you out to establish a legit address that will appear on your driver's license and all other documents. They will keep all your important mail for you. And chances are it will be safer than in someone else's hands.
That's a really great point, Julian. I appreciate that, and that's something that many service providers are moving into doing more of, is help with documentation, helping, and that's not just legal, like citizenship documentation, though for some people that is the case, but about actually like having a driver's license, being able to have legal documentation of existence, right? Because we need these things in order to drive your vehicle, in order to get insurance, in order to, pay your ticket, right? All these things are necessary. And so it's, I really appreciate you. First off, saying why it is important for you to maintain your benefits of care. And I think that part of this question too, Julian, and I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, is how do you maintain your benefits and care? What are the ways that you maintain that?
You have to be on top of the situation all the time. You have to think ahead, plan ahead. You have to gain be resourceful and gain as much knowledge as possible. This is the only thing that cannot be taken away from you, your knowledge. Everything else you may lose. Knowledge you will never lose. As more knowledge you gain on a subject, any subject is better. Specifically in regards to medical benefits, it's extremely important to keep all your appointments intact and follow all the appointments, follow all the services that you have to go through and see people that you have to see to keep your benefits coming. This is a challenge when you're moving from one place to another, like permanently, like I did from New York to the West Coast. It was a challenge not to fall into a gap. Your benefits, like my benefits being canceled in the state of New York and not getting it somewhere else before you apply. You have to do it as soon as possible. You have to apply for residency. You have to establish, many states, it's enough to rent a PO box at the local post office to obtain state residency and then claim your benefits in that particular state. Or, for example, like a state of Nevada, it's much more difficult to obtain residency there. It's not just go to your post office and rent a PO box and you automatically became a resident of the state. No, it's not like that. You have to spend a month to stay there, rent an RV spot or rent an apartment. Yet there are workarounds. And like I said, go to a local, like Nevada Outreach, go to the local outreach place. They will help you out with that. You don't need to spend a month over there. They will give you a paper proving you to be a homeless person living in your vehicle. And based on this document, your DMV will issue your driver's license without that month of paying rent for RV spot or the apartment.
That's so helpful. Thank you, Julian. And none of this, just to be clear, is legal advice. This is just Julian's observations of what has worked for him. And people, as you mentioned, Julian, a lot of it's about trying to find loopholes. It's about trying to find ways to get your ends, your needs met in this very difficult to navigate situation. And some of the other things to consider, as Julian mentioned, knowledge is your friend here, that there's a lot of information out there. YouTube University is a big one. A lot of people post about residency requirements and how to achieve residency on YouTube and other places online. It's important that you learn the basic requirements of what you need to for residency, to maintain your paperwork, your proof of residency, your medical appointments. What do you need personally to maintain that? And the question, these are some of the questions that are on the slide here. Do you actually need to be physically present, as Julian just mentioned, for a certain amount of time, or spend a certain amount of money, or show that you've contributed to the economy of a state in order to receive benefits there, or to be a resident there? There are some states, I'm not going to name them because I don't want to blow them up, but I'm sure that if you all want to look it up, you can find out. There are at least one state where you can actually apply for your vehicle registration and your license remotely. You can do it online. You don't even have to be in the state, and they will send you that information. There are other states that highly incentivize people becoming residents to their state because they have very low populations and they're looking to get more congressional representation. So they make it very easy to stay there. In fact, some states you only have to stay for like 24 hours and show that you stayed overnight in a hotel and just show a receipt, and that's all you need to have residency. So it's important to look out there of what sort of residency requirements are per state. Again, do you need to return regularly to the state for your appointments? Do you need to come back? Things like mental health care often cannot be given, even if it's remote, across state lines. So you might have a mental health care provider in one state who, even though you might be talking to them online, actually cannot provide that's care if you're in another state. So these are the sorts of things that you want to look into as you are trying to plan out where you might be establishing residency. And of course, the final thing is be very careful of double dipping. You don't want to run into a legal problem. You don't want to run into a situation where you would be receiving two forms of benefits at the same time, because it is very, very likely that that will be found out at some point, and you will be required to pay that back, if not other penalties on that. So you want to be very careful to not do that as well. I think we're going to probably have time for one more question. Yeah, please.
This is very important. A lot of people, for those folks who will or thinking of establishing residency in the state of California, this state is different in many ways, specifically in regards to medical benefits and food stamps. Each and every county like a separate entity, and if you move like I do, like all snowbirds do, with seasons up and down the coast, north and south, as you move across the state of California and you think all your benefits are the same, it's not exactly that way. You have to actually register every time you move from one county to another.
That's right. That's right.
Transferred from one county to another. Yet there is still a loophole of some kind. They will allow you to visit local doctors. Your insurance company will pay for it. You will still be getting your food stamp benefits there and your social security benefits. Yet it's not for a long time. I'm not sure what is this time stretch here, how long they allow it to happen. But from my own experience, they can allow you to visit local doctor even if you're not registered at the local county for maybe 2 or 3 months. But if you're thinking of staying there longer, make sure you transfer all your benefits to a local county where you stay.
That's a great point. And that's actually exactly what Peggy Lee Kennedy had said at the same time, actually. So great job, Peggy Lee. I think you read Julian's mind there, that these restrictions really do, particularly in California, but I think it's in other states too, vary by county to county. So it can be a bit difficult. It's not just about state residency. It often depends on which county you're in. And if you are registered for benefits in one county, you could potentially have difficulties receiving benefits in another county, or may not. And so this is something, again, knowledge is your friend. Looking into these specific questions about residency requirements and how they affect your benefits is really, really important. We have about 5 minutes left of this meeting. I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to put it up in chat. Again, chat moderator will put the next question up in chat. In fact, I'll put it on the screen right now. But one of the things that I want us to do too, when we wrap up, is I want to remind everyone that this is sort of the start of a conversation. Julian and I, as we were talking through this is something that's an important conversation that we can only just scrape the surface of. There's so many issues around residency requirements, and it affects different people in different ways. And Julian, again, thank you for sharing this, for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences, because you're starting a conversation. And I encourage us to continue this conversation over the next year, over the coming months, and ultimately into our next summit next year, because I think we should have a similar session next year about this, bring in more voices so more people can learn about this, and also talk about ways that we can improve this sort of situation. So with that said, our last question, Julian, for you and for the rest of the panel is, how have you faced discrimination from service providers, maybe from members of the community at large, or from law enforcement? What are examples, briefly in the next couple minutes, that you have experienced discrimination, Julian?
Okay, easily. I mentioned the fact that I was refused my food stamp benefits in New York. The lady clerk was telling me, when you bring your proof of residency, you get your food stamps back. She laughed at me. I went through countless number of agencies and organizations who help people in need, who help disabled and homeless, trying to obtain residency, public residency, like state supported or federal supported apartment in New York. And it was all for no avail. This thing never been realized. And for example, I was investigated by one of these organizations not for trying to fake my homelessness. So I realized after 15 years of trying, most of these organizations and funds and whatever they there because the problem is there. And if the problem with homelessness goes away, they and their services are no longer needed. And so they do anything and everything to keep afloat and receive government funds. They want to keep things as they are. They want to keep the status quo. And they do weird things, like I mentioned just now. They try to tell me that I'm not homeless. I'm faking my homeless. I'm just trying to obtain these services from them, faking my homeless.
You know, that's a really good point, Julian. I think it's a great one for us to end with. We have a couple minutes left, but I think it's this point of that vehicle residents are often in what we call a liminal space, a space between two places, right? Where they're often, as you mentioned, people are saying, you can't get services until you have an address. And yet at the same time, they're saying you're not really homeless because you're faking it in some way, right? And that this issue of people having a vehicle, a residence in a sense of their vehicle, and then not being able to have services or not at the same time fitting into services is very, very common. I definitely don't want to throw our service provider colleagues under the bus. Many of them under the proverbial bus. Many of them are doing excellent work and are really trying to help. And a lot of the issues come from federal regulations, state regulations, funding regulations, that the wording of them determine that people are, that any person who is unsheltered is considered homeless, and that the only response is to put that person into housing. And that helps for so many people and can be a great response. But for many people like yourself, Julian, who may just want a place to park or may need a place to park while you're trying to get into housing, the response of saying this person needs to go into an emergency shelter right away may not be the best fit. And that actually can even maybe even cause more harm to the individual. I don't know how many of you also have experienced that sort of thing, but another example of that sort of discrimination we might have experienced is the famous knock. That's often referred to as sometimes the knock of doom, which experienced by people living in vehicles of a law enforcement, a security guard telling a person to move along simply because they're sleeping in their vehicle overnight. And there's, again, many different forms of bias and challenges that people experience living in vehicles. We're only able to just scratch the surface. But I want to thank you once again, Julian, for this wonderful conversation, for your honesty, for sharing your truth, for sharing your experiences, and for starting this conversation, because it's an important conversation, and I hope that we're able to continue it over this coming year and the years to come. Thank you, Julian, once again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you. One more thing to add, like in New York, you're not even considered a homeless until you enter the local shelter and they put your name on the computer. You may live on the street for years like I did and run to all the agencies and organizations trying to get help, telling them that you live on the street. And they will listen to you and they will make it look like they're trying to help. But officially, you're not even considered a homeless until you enter a New York City shelter and they put your name on the computer. And that might be even more dangerous for you, being in New York City shelter rather than being on the street. And that's why a lot of people choose being on the street rather than being in a shelter in New York City. And
right.
This is important. And you mentioned in the beginning of this whole session that safety comes first, no matter what you do. Remember about this.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's not just in New York City; it's across the country that people have that, and often in many places, people are required to go through housing prioritization systems, something like what's often called the VI SPDAT, which is a tool that people have to do an assessment that prioritizes them for housing. And if they're living in a vehicle, that may be again used as an asset that may deprioritize them for housing. And at the same time, that person then needs needs to go into an emergency shelter or be in that system in order to get assistance. And so this can be a real problem because, as you mentioned, Julian, if you're living in your van and the only thing and you need to go into an emergency shelter in order to get support, that might not be possible. In fact, it might not even be safe for you and for your property, right? For leaving your van on the street, it puts it at risk. And that's the kind of thing that can be a significant barrier for people to get assistance they need.
I would never go back to shelters after living in my van. Never. And this, like you said, it may be an obstacle in some places when you live in your vehicle to obtain some kind of social services or obtain a place in a shelter. Well, I don't need to. I don't have to.
Right.
It's much safer for me staying in my van rather than being in a public shelter, specifically in New York City. I cannot talk about other places. I was not there. I don't know. But New York City shelters are definitely a place to avoid.
Yes, thank you very much. And I know that many people would probably have experienced very similar things across the country. Well, thank you once again, Julian. This was an excellent presentation. Really appreciate this conversation. And thank you, everybody, for attending.